Hi, my name is Holly Grace-Williams and I'm the Technical Director at Secarma. Secarma are a cybersecurity consultancy specialising in penetration testing. So we try to break into computer systems and buildings to demonstrate real-world risks to customers, ultimately with the intention of them being able to build more secure systems, remediate vulnerabilities and reduce risk. Cybersecurity is protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data in electronic systems. So this is making sure that secret data stays secret and that users aren't able to change or delete data that they shouldn't be able to change or delete. That's it kind of in a summary, but the protection of the security of online and internet connected or electronic systems in general. Originally, I didn't start with the intention of going into cybersecurity. I wanted to work on communication systems, and in particular, satellite systems. The organisation that I worked with as a communication systems engineer had a particular context where security was very, very important to them. So everything that we built, everything that we worked on had to be secure, and therefore moving over from a network engineering into a cybersecurity role was a simple one. And I think that highlights really to a lot of people, you can do that. If you don't want to go straight into cybersecurity, or maybe if you can't settle on definitely a single role that you want to do, you can move between them. So it's not unusual for IT support people to move into penetration testing roles, and it's certainly not unusual for network engineers or software developers to move across either. So you don't need to settle on one role, you can move if you'd like. Maths, coding, and electronic skills are definitely important, and there's a benefit if you're good with those things, but it certainly isn't required. If you think about penetration testing, electronic skills can benefit you in things like hardware hacking, in the researching of breaking hardware devices physically, side channel attacks, those kinds of things. But there's plenty of roles in security, there's plenty of roles in the broader cybersecurity where those aren't required skill sets. So if you're not interested, not confident, or not very good at maths, coding, or electronics, there'll be a role somewhere that benefits you. In penetration testing, for example, I code frequently. I would go as far as to say I code every single day. But what we're looking at really is task automation. We don't sit down 9 to 5 coding. That's the only thing that we do. It's a very small part of what we do to automate the tasks that we do, to allow us flexibility, to manipulate data, those kinds of things. So whilst I code frequently, it's not a core part of what I do. So on the penetration testing side of the business, we get involved with customers where they have some kind of scenario or some kind of risk that they're concerned about, or they want us to just come in and take a look at their systems and find any weaknesses that they may have overlooked. So a recent piece of work that I did with an organisation was they were concerned with what could a member of staff's device be used for. This is either if a member of staff became malicious, that kind of insider threat, disgruntled employee, that kind of risk, or if one of their devices was compromised, say through a phishing email or something like that. What could happen in those scenarios? So we went into the organisation, plug a device into the network and see how far we can get. Ultimately, in that case, we're very quickly able to gain access to some user accounts, a small number of low-privilege user accounts, perform some privilege escalation techniques, gain access to an administrator account, and fully compromise their network. This allowed us access to all of their computer systems as an administrator. We could read data, we could change data, and whatever it was that you were concerned about, be it payroll data, be it sensitive corporate, intellectual property, that kind of thing, we could have accessed all of it. Whilst that's very cool for us from the kind of hacking point of view, that being able to understand systems to such a degree that we can cause them to have these risks, exploit these vulnerabilities. Ultimately, the goal with working with customers like that is to demonstrate how to prevent other attackers from being able to do that. So we go in a professional capacity to find vulnerabilities, to give remediation advice into how those can be dealt with. Sometimes it's a little bit of a shock to the company, certainly with the speed in which we can operate. For that particular customer, the most recent customer I worked with, a full administrator compromise of their internal network took about 90 minutes, which is a lot faster than they were expecting it to be. But the whole point of getting us in is to find the risks so that they can be remediated. So yeah, good piece of work recently. We're a cybersecurity consultancy, so cybersecurity is core to what we do. It's not like we're software developers and security is just an important aspect of it. Cybersecurity is absolutely core to what we do. So it's not that it contributes to the business, it's almost everything that we do. almost all organizations have something sensitive that they need to protect. This can be intellectual property, or it can just be things like information about their employees, payroll data, that kind of thing. So we work with organizations to make sure that their systems and data stays safe. The difference here, of course, is that security is all that we do every day. It's a specialization of ours. Whereas a lot of the companies that we work with, it's just one aspect. There's kind of a stereotype of some organizations really only considering security, once a year when it comes around to their annual audit or something like that. It's all that we do every single day. So it's a little bit different, and sometimes it can give us an advantage in certain areas because of that. Well, really at Secarma, we take a look at the full range of security risks. In the penetration testing team, we do physical access testing as well as electronic testing, so the hacking side of things. With physical access testing, it's breaking into buildings, generally trying to gain access to confidential documents or gain access to electronic systems that we can target with the standard hacking techniques. And with the electronic side of things, it's what you expect. It's trying to bypass people, processes, and technologies. So trying to find misconfigurations in systems, missing patches, vulnerabilities that haven't previously been found before, as well as trying to bypass people and processes. So looking at things like phishing attacks. Can we demonstrate a phishing attack to cause an employee to disclose some information or perform an action on our part? So the main risks that we see, broad risks across people, process, and technologies, everything from hacking to social engineering to physical access. Cybersecurity is incredibly creative, certainly in what we see in pen testing. So with penetration testing, we're trying to fundamentally understand how a system has been built and how it has been implemented and integrated. If you can find some things that haven't been considered, some weaknesses in the integration or the implementation, then security risks can be demonstrated. This means that you ultimately have to think about the things that the designers and the developers of that system didn't consider. Is there some kind of input that you can give this system where an unexpected behavior will take place? So it's incredibly creative as a role. Accessibility and security, generally, unless you consider it very strongly, can be at odds with each other. And this is something that comes up a lot. So, for example, with security, one of the things that we might try and do is restrict user input to block attacks, and certainly things like anti-automation. So if you can block a certain piece of malware from running, then an attack could be blocked. A really common kind of anti-automation technique would be using something like a captcha. So this might be something like asking the user to click all of the cars in a photograph, something that's traditionally been very difficult for computers to be able to do, but humans can generally do that very easily, clicking cars in a photograph, simple tasks like that. However, if the user has accessibility concerns, this could be something like they're partially sighted or blind, something like that, they should still be able to use these systems, but that kind of anti-automation technique wouldn't work for them. We'd need some kind of alternative. So just in the same way that when we appreciate systems for, is there some creative way we can use this system to bypass its security, when we're building the security systems, we need to consider accessibility and make sure that any protection that we put in place doesn't lock users out, doesn't prevent users from being able to use the system. Certainly considering accessibility needs is a big part of that. The key things that organizations need to consider is that whilst you're accepting user input and you want to be flexible and help users use your systems, not all users are benign, some are malicious, and they'll try and subvert systems in ways to cause security risks. So I think the easiest way to consider it is user input cannot be trusted, and user input therefore needs to be checked, validated, normalized so that payloads can't be input into systems. So when you're building a system, just kind of put the other hat on and think, if you were going to try and break this, if you're going to find some risk that might expose data, it might impact the availability of the system, allow you to alter data that you shouldn't be able to alter, think about that kind of thing. How I would recommend building systems is first putting on that kind of how would we break this if we were an adversary, and thinking of it in that way. I think there's two answers to this. The first answer is it isn't all the latest kind of attack. Vulnerabilities stay around for a very, very long time. A really good example of this would be SQL injection, which was first publicized on Christmas Day of 1998. It is a very old vulnerability. And yeah, it was used to break into TalkTalk in 2015, and it was used to break into the Illinois State Board of Elections in 2016. Those are just two examples of that vulnerability being used. So vulnerabilities hang around for a very long time. It isn't unusual for vulnerabilities to be exploited that are 20 years old. So it's not just keeping up to date with the latest information, but keeping up to date with all of the historic information, vulnerabilities that have been around longer than you may have been in industry. So there's those things to consider. But ultimately, how we keep up to date with security news, the latest research, those kinds of things, reading a lot of white papers, attending a lot of conferences, working with other researchers on what it is that they're learning about at the moment, and essentially doing a lot of on-the-job training, knowledge sharing, those kinds of things. So whatever works for you, if you like reading books, if you like reading blogs, or if you like attending conferences in person, there's a lot of different ways you can stay up to date. But I think, yeah, you've just got to kind of acknowledge the fact that new technologies come out all the time, and there is a whole world of vulnerabilities out there to learn about.